Two well-dressed 16-year-old black twins, Jaden and Jordan Wilson, dragged from first-class seats despite valid tickets. Flight attendant Lisa Bennett sneers, "These seats aren't for people like you." Then suddenly, the cabin falls silent as 6'4" Darius Wilson, Nationwide Airlines' new CEO, enters. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell us where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to show your support for stories that expose injustice. Can you imagine being humiliated just for sitting in the seats you paid for? Let's find out what happened next. The morning sun filtered through the custom blinds of the Wilson family's suburban Atlanta home, casting golden rays across the breakfast table where twins Jaden and Jordan Wilson sat in perfect synchronicity, spreading jam on their toast. At 16, the boys were already exceptional in every measurable way, both maintaining perfect 4.0 GPAs at Westlake Preparatory Academy. Both headed to the National Youth Science Competition in New York with groundbreaking research on sustainable energy alternatives, and both bearing the dignified restraint their father had taught them was necessary for young black men in America. "Double-check your presentation notes before you board," Darius Wilson reminded them, his imposing 6'4" frame somehow fitting comfortably at the kitchen island as he reviewed emails on his tablet. Though recently appointed CEO of Nationwide Airlines following a 20-year climb through corporate ranks, Darius maintained a deliberately low public profile. His appointment had been announced in industry publications but hadn't made mainstream news, a strategic decision to allow him to implement changes before facing the inevitable scrutiny that came with being one of the few black executives leading a major American airline. Catherine Wilson entered the kitchen, her surgeon's hands carefully arranging her son's medication in their travel cases. "I still wish you were traveling with them, Darius," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 20 years watching her husband and sons navigate spaces not designed to welcome them. "They'll be fine, Kate," Darius assured her, though his eyes betrayed concern. "Besides, I'll be on the next flight out after my emergency board meeting. I'll be there before they even present tomorrow." Catherine wasn't just any worried mother. As one of Atlanta's top pediatric surgeons, she'd built her career saving children while simultaneously preparing her own sons for a world that would judge them by their skin before their character. The Wilson family represented black excellence in every sense, their achievements earned despite, not because of, the systems around them. "Remember what we talked about," Darius said, pushing away from the table to stand before his sons. "You'll encounter people who don't think you belong there. Head up, shoulders back, speak clearly," Jordan recited, the more diplomatic of the twins. "And always keep the receipts," Jaden added with a slight edge to his voice. Unlike his brother's measured responses, Jaden felt every slight more personally. "Exactly," Darius nodded. "Your tickets, your boarding passes, your IDs, everything organized and accessible. Don't give anyone excuses." The boys nodded solemnly. These weren't just travel tips. They were survival strategies in a country where even their first-class tickets wouldn't shield them from suspicion. "Your new suits look very distinguished," Catherine commented, adjusting Jordan's collar with motherly precision. Darius had insisted on buying them tailored Armani suits for the competition, not as symbols of wealth, but as armor against prejudice. "People will still make assumptions," Darius had explained while at the tailor. "But we remove excuses when we exceed expectations in every way possible." The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication developed in the womb and perfected over 16 years. They understood the unstated reality. No matter how they dressed, spoke, or achieved, some people would only ever see their blackness. "Calvin should be here any minute to drive you to the airport," Catherine said, checking her watch. Darius selected him personally from the executive transportation department. What Catherine didn't say was that Darius had specifically requested Calvin because the older black driver had 20 years of experience navigating white spaces while ensuring VIP passengers arrived safely. Another layer of protection for his sons. As they waited for Calvin's arrival, Darius pulled 2 identical envelopes from his briefcase and quietly slipped one into each of his sons' carry-on bags without their notice. Inside each was a handwritten letter of fatherly wisdom and pride he'd prepared months ago when they qualified for the national competition. The doorbell chimed, announcing Calvin's arrival. The twins gathered their luggage while Catherine fussed over last-minute details. "Remember," Darius said, his voice lowering as he embraced each son, "you carry our family name, but you also carry the hopes of those who came before us. Never let anyone diminish your dignity." The twins nodded, the weight of his words settling on their young shoulders. Neither realized these routine parental warnings would be tested before they even left the ground. Atlanta International Airport hummed with the controlled chaos of a Tuesday morning. Jordan and Jaden Wilson navigated the terminal with the practiced ease of seasoned travelers, rolling their carry-on luggage in perfect tandem. Despite flying often with their parents, this marked their first solo journey, a milestone their father had deemed them ready for. The first hint of trouble came at the priority check-in counter. While the business travelers ahead of them, mostly white men in wrinkled suits, breezed through with cursory ID checks, the twins found themselves under unexpected scrutiny. "First class," the security guard, Raymond Thomas, according to his nameplate, frowned at their boarding passes, his eyebrows arching in poorly concealed disbelief. "I'm going to need to see some additional identification." Jordan stepped forward smoothly. "Of course, sir. We have our school IDs as well." His voice carried the polite deference his father had taught him to employ in such situations, not because respect was deserved, but because defiance could be dangerous. Raymond examined their IDs with exaggerated care, holding them up to the light as if checking for counterfeits. "These don't have your address. They're minors," a woman in line behind them interjected. "They don't typically have driver's licenses." Raymond's expression soured, but finding no legitimate reason to detain them further, he reluctantly waved them through with a mumbled "procedure." Jaden's jaw tightened, but Jordan placed a subtle hand on his brother's arm, their private signal for patience. This was merely the opening act of a familiar performance. At the check-in counter, they encountered Lisa Bennett for the first time, a flight attendant with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that seemed to lift her eyebrows into a permanent expression of suspicion. She was assisting at the counter due to the morning rush. "There must be some mistake," Lisa said without looking up from her computer after the twins presented their boarding passes. "These are first-class tickets." "Yes, ma'am," Jordan confirmed with a practiced smile. "Our father arranged them." "And who might your father be?" Lisa asked, her tone suggesting no answer would satisfy her. "Darius Wilson," Jaden replied, the pride in his voice unmistakable. The name clearly meant nothing to Lisa. "Well, I'll need to verify these. It's unusual to have unaccompanied minors in first class." "We're 16, Jordan clarified. "According to Nationwide Airlines policy, passengers 15 and older can travel unaccompanied in any cabin class." Lisa's eyes narrowed at being corrected, particularly by someone she had already decided didn't belong. "I'll still need to verify." She made a show of typing into her computer, though both boys suspected she was merely going through motions to justify her suspicion. Behind them, other passengers shifted impatiently. Some cast sympathetic glances at the well-dressed teenagers, while others muttered about holding up the line with pointed annoyance. "Everything appears to be in order," Lisa finally conceded with obvious reluctance, applying baggage tags to their carry-ons with unnecessary force. "Though I'm surprised your parents would spend so much on tickets." The implication hung in the air. "People like you can't afford this." "Thank you for your thoroughness," Jordan responded with the diplomacy that often diffused such situations. Jaden remained silent, his expressive eyes communicating what his lips wouldn't. This woman had revealed her prejudice within 30 seconds of meeting them. The next hurdle appeared at security, where despite their TSA pre-check status, they were pulled aside for random additional screening by an agent named Philip. "Arms out," Philip instructed Jaden flatly, while travelers with lighter skin tones streamed through the standard metal detectors without secondary inspection. "Is there a problem?" Jordan inquired politely, maintaining the careful balance between asserting rights and avoiding escalation. "Random selection," Philip responded mechanically, though his eyes avoided direct contact, the telltale sign of a lie. Jayden caught his brother's eye as the TSA agent's gloved hands moved down his arms. In that look passed a lifetime of shared experiences. The store security guards who followed them through department stores, the teachers who expressed surprise at their articulate presentations, the neighbors who questioned whether they really lived in their upscale neighborhood. Their father's words echoed silently between them. "It's not your responsibility to make them comfortable with their discomfort, but it is your responsibility to return home safely to your mother and me." 20 minutes later, with their dignity slightly bruised but intact, the twins reached their gate. Jordan dialed their mother's number, putting the call on speaker while keeping his voice deliberately light. "We're at the gate, Mom. Everything's fine." Catherine's voice carried both relief and lingering concern. "No issues with your tickets or boarding passes?" "Nothing we couldn't handle," Jordan assured her, omitting the details that would only worry her. Jayden, less inclined toward protective omissions, added, "Just the usual." The silence on the other end told them their mother understood exactly what the usual entailed. Meanwhile, in the Nationwide Airlines executive conference room across town, Darius Wilson sat through his emergency board meeting with half his attention on the quarterly projections and the other half on an inexplicable feeling of unease. He'd planned to take a later flight to New York, giving him time to address the sudden revenue discrepancy that had prompted this meeting. But something about his son's journey tugged at his paternal instincts. "I think we should recess until tomorrow," he announced to the surprised board members. "I've reviewed these numbers, and I believe the discrepancy stems from the system migration last quarter. I want our financial team to rerun the analysis using pre-migration accounting protocols." His decisive leadership style had earned him respect among the board, who nodded in agreement despite the unusual adjournment. What they didn't know was that Darius had already solved the discrepancy problem, but was using it as an excuse to catch his son's flight. Back at the gate, boarding had begun for Nationwide Flight 1382 to New York. The twins approached the priority boarding line, documents ready for what they anticipated would be yet another challenge. "First-class boarding now," announced the gate agent, barely glancing at the passengers until the Wilson twins stepped forward. The agent's welcoming smile faltered momentarily before professionalism reasserted itself. "Boarding passes, please." As Jordan and Jayden made their way down the jet bridge, their excitement about the competition momentarily overshadowed the morning's microaggressions. Neither realized they were walking into a confrontation that would change not only their lives, but an entire corporate culture. As Jayden and Jordan Wilson stepped aboard Nationwide Airlines Flight 1382, their presence in the first-class cabin created an immediate disruption in the atmosphere. The lead flight attendant, Lisa Bennett, the same woman who had questioned their tickets at check-in, visibly stiffened, her practiced customer service smile evaporating. "Welcome aboard," she managed through tight lips, her eyes darting to their boarding passes as if expecting to find them suddenly invalid. The twins proceeded to their assigned seats, 2A and 2B, premium spots with extra legroom near the front of the first-class cabin. They stowed their carry-ons in the overhead compartments with practiced efficiency, then settled into the plush leather seats. "Did you see her face?" Jayden whispered to his brother. "You'd think we were hijacking the plane instead of sitting in seats we paid for." "Just focus on our presentation," Jordan replied, always the peacekeeper. "We'll be in New York in 2 hours." Their conversation halted as Lisa approached, hovering over them with barely concealed displeasure. "I'll need to see your boarding passes again," she announced loudly enough for surrounding passengers to hear. Jordan produced both passes without comment, maintaining the dignified composure their father had instilled in them. Lisa scrutinized the documents with exaggerated thoroughness. "These seats are in first class," she stated, as if this were news to them. "Yes, ma'am," Jordan confirmed patiently. "That's why we're sitting here." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "There must be some confusion. These seats are usually reserved for our premium customers." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. "You don't look like premium customers." "We are premium customers," Jaden interjected, his tolerance wearing thin. "Our tickets are valid. We've shown them 3 times now." A middle-aged white man across the aisle, later identified as Warren Phillips, a marketing executive from Boston, leaned forward. "Is there a problem? These young men were ahead of me in the first-class boarding line. They belong here as much as any of us." Lisa's attention snapped to Warren. "Sir, I'm simply following protocol." Her voice dropped to a stage whisper. "We sometimes have issues with passengers trying to upgrade themselves after boarding." "We didn't upgrade ourselves," Jordan stated firmly. "Our father purchased these tickets weeks ago." Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line as she retreated toward the front of the cabin, where she engaged in hushed conversation with the cockpit. Through the partially open door, the twins could see pilot Harold Green and co-pilot Mitchell Davis glancing in their direction with concerned expressions. Around them, the first-class cabin continued filling with passengers, predominantly white business travelers who cast curious, sometimes suspicious glances at the teenagers. A few, like Warren Phillips, offered supportive nods, while others seemed visibly uncomfortable with their presence. Thomas Anderson, a businessman in seat 3C, subtly positioned his phone to record the unfolding situation, a decision that would later prove crucial. After conferring with the pilots, Lisa returned with Nancy Parker, the senior flight attendant, trailing behind her with a clipboard. "There seems to be a protocol violation," Lisa announced with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Unaccompanied minors aren't permitted in first class without adult supervision." "That's not accurate," Jordan responded calmly, drawing on his meticulous research of airline policies. Nationwide Airlines policy states passengers 15 and older can travel unaccompanied in any cabin class. We're both 16. Nancy glanced down at her clipboard, clearly searching for a policy that didn't exist. "Well, there's also the matter of passenger complaints." "What complaints?" Jaden demanded, his patience evaporating. "We literally sat down 30 seconds ago." Jordan discreetly pulled out his phone, texting his brother though they sat side by side. "Stay calm. Document everything. Dad taught us this." Jaden's response was immediate. "This is exactly what Dad warned us about. They don't think we belong here." The confrontation paused momentarily as boarding continued, with Lisa and Nancy retreating to the galley for further consultation. The brothers used the opportunity to compose themselves, Jordan reviewing competition notes while Jaden maintained vigilant awareness of the crew's movements. Their temporary reprieve ended when Lisa returned, this time accompanied by Glenn Harrison, a burly security officer whose hand rested unnecessarily on his taser. "We've received complaints about disruptive behavior," Glenn announced loudly, causing several passengers to look up in alarm. "That's completely false," Jordan objected, his composure finally cracking. "We've been sitting quietly in our assigned seats." "The crew has final authority on passenger seating," Glenn stated flatly. "You'll need to move to available seats in economy class." "No," Jaden said firmly. "We have valid first-class tickets. We're not moving." Glenn's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to remove you from the aircraft." A second security officer, Trent Wallace, appeared at the front of the cabin, creating an intimidating presence as he moved toward the teenagers. "Can I see the specific complaint?" Jordan asked, attempting to de-escalate with rationality. "We have a right to know who's accusing us and of what." "Airline security protocols don't require disclosure of complainants," Glenn replied mechanically, reaching for Jordan's arm. "Now come with us willingly, or we'll have to use necessary force." "Do you think these security officers were following actual protocol or making up rules to justify discrimination?" Comment number 1. If you believe this was a clear case of racial profiling. Or number 2, if you think there might be legitimate security concerns we haven't heard yet. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories exposing injustice in everyday places. What do you think happens next when these innocent teenagers face humiliation for simply existing in a space they rightfully paid for? Let's continue with this shocking story. What began as subtle discrimination erupted into public spectacle as security officer Glenn Harrison gripped Jordan Wilson's arm with unnecessary force. yanking the teenager from his seat, despite no resistance. Simultaneously, Officer Trent Wallace moved toward Jayden, whose expression hardened with the righteous indignation of the unjustly accused. "We have valid tickets," Jordan repeated, his voice maintaining remarkable steadiness despite the hand clamped around his bicep. "This is our assigned seating. You need to come with us now," Glenn insisted, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin as passengers watched the scene unfold with varying expressions of shock, discomfort, and in some disturbing cases, satisfaction. Thomas Anderson in 3C had already begun recording on his phone, capturing what would soon become the latest viral example of racism in America. Several other passengers followed suit, their devices raised to document the escalating situation. "Get your hands off my brother," Jayden demanded as Trent reached for him. Unlike Jordan's diplomatic approach, Jayden's protective instincts flared. "We haven't done anything wrong." Lisa Bennett stepped forward, addressing the cabin with practiced authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're removing unruly passengers who have refused to comply with crew instructions." "That's a lie," Jayden protested as Trent grabbed him by both arms, pulling him into the aisle with excessive force that sent the teenager's phone clattering across the floor. "We've complied with everything. We showed our tickets 3 times." The twins were now separated, each restrained by a security officer as Lisa continued her theatrical performance for the benefit of passengers who couldn't see the entire situation. "Please remain seated while we handle this situation," she announced with the false concern of someone creating rather than resolving a problem. Jordan, still attempting to navigate the situation through reason, reached into his pocket with his free hand. "Please, just look at our tickets again." Glenn interpreted the movement as resistance, twisting Jordan's arm behind his back in a painful compliance hold that drew a gasp from nearby passengers. "Stop resisting," he ordered loudly, creating a false narrative for witnesses. "He's not resisting," shouted a woman later identified as Olivia Martinez from seat 4D. "This is completely unnecessary." "Ma'am, please remain in your seat or you'll be removed as well," Trent responded without looking in her direction, his focus entirely on maintaining his grip on Jayden. Pilot Harold Green emerged from the cockpit, observing the situation with clinical detachment. Rather than intervene to de-escalate, he simply watched as 2 teenagers were manhandled for the crime of occupying space someone had decided they didn't deserve. "Captain, these passengers have refused multiple requests to relocate," Lisa reported with practiced professionalism, as if they were following standard procedure rather than manufacturing a crisis. Harold nodded, his silence an endorsement of the unfolding injustice. "Proceed with removal for the safety of other passengers," he instructed before returning to the cockpit, washing his hands of the situation while maintaining plausible deniability. As the security officers dragged the twins toward the exit, Jayden's carefully packed competition materials spilled from his messenger bag, scattering scientific papers and presentation notes across the first-class cabin. Jordan's glasses were knocked askew, hanging precariously from one ear as Glenn pushed him forward. "Look at their tickets! They're supposed to be here!" Warren Phillips stood up, pointing to the boarding passes that had fallen during the struggle. "Sir, remain seated," Trent barked, his free hand moving to his taser in an implicit threat that silenced further protest. The humiliation intensified as passengers in economy class watched the procession with curious stares, forming impressions based solely on the sight of 2 black teenagers being forcibly removed by security. Without context, many would assume wrongdoing rather than injustice. "This is what happens when they let anyone buy tickets," muttered a passenger in the second row, just loud enough for the twins to hear. "Animals," whispered another, the racial undertone unmistakable. These comments, caught clearly on Thomas Anderson's recording, would later spark particular outrage when the video went viral. As they approached the aircraft door, final boarding was underway, with a few remaining passengers queued in the jet bridge, watching the scene with confusion and concern. Jordan made one last attempt at dignity. "Please, call our father, Darius Wilson. He's—" "Sure, kid," Glenn interrupted with patronizing dismissal. "We'll call whoever you want once you're off this aircraft." Neither officer nor any crew member bothered to verify this claim that might have prevented the entire situation. The assumption that these well-dressed, articulate teenagers couldn't possibly be connected to anyone important reflected the very prejudice their father had warned them about that morning. What no one on that aircraft realized was that one of the final boarding passengers, delayed by his emergency board meeting and rushing to surprise his sons, was about to turn their manufactured crisis into a reckoning none of them had anticipated. The jet bridge buzzed with last-minute boarding announcements as Darius Wilson strode toward Flight 1382, his imposing 6'4" frame moving with purpose. Having rescheduled his board meeting, he'd managed to secure the last first-class seat on his son's flight, planning to surprise them with his early arrival. His mind preoccupied with the upcoming science competition, Darius was wholly unprepared for the scene that greeted him at the aircraft door. "Stop! You're hurting him!" Jaden's voice carried down the jet bridge, immediately capturing Darius's attention. Rounding the corner, Darius froze momentarily as his brain processed the incomprehensible sight. His sons, his brilliant, respectful, carefully raised sons, restrained and being forcibly removed from the aircraft by airport security officers. Jordan's glasses hung askew, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled from rough handling. Jaden struggled against Officer Trent's grip, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and humiliation that no 16-year-old should experience. For 3 heartbeats, Darius remained motionless, compartmentalizing the rush of parental fury with the disciplined control that had helped him navigate corporate America as a black executive. This was not simply a father witnessing his children's mistreatment. This was the CEO of Nationwide Airlines observing a catastrophic failure of his company's culture. "Release my sons immediately," Darius finally spoke, his deep voice resonating with quiet authority that stopped all movement in the confined space. Glenn Harrison, still gripping Jordan's arm, turned with the irritated expression of someone facing yet another interruption. "Sir, you'll need to board or step aside. We're handling a security situation." "The only security situation I see," Darius replied with dangerous calm, "is 2 Nationwide Airlines employees physically assaulting the sons of the company's chief executive officer." The effect was immediate and electric. Glenn's hand dropped from Jordan as if burned. Trent's grip on Jaden slackened enough for the teenager to pull free, immediately moving to his brother's side. "Dad!" Jordan's voice cracked with relief, the composed teenager finally showing the vulnerability beneath his careful exterior. Flight attendant Lisa Bennett, who had been supervising the removal with poorly concealed satisfaction, now stood paralyzed in the aircraft doorway. The blood drained from her face as recognition dawned. Not of Darius specifically, but of the catastrophic error she had orchestrated. "You're," she began, unable to complete the sentence as her mind raced through potential damage control strategies. "Darius Wilson," he confirmed, reaching into his jacket to produce his company identification. "CEO of Nationwide Airlines as of 6 weeks ago. And you are?" Lisa's hand trembled slightly as she touched her name badge. "Lisa Bennett, first-class lead attendant." "Not for long," Jaden muttered under his breath, earning a warning glance from his father that silenced but didn't diminish his righteous anger. By now, pilot Harold Green had emerged from the cockpit, alerted to the new development by the sudden silence in the forward cabin. Recognition flashed across his face. Unlike Lisa, he had attended the executive announcement when Darius was appointed, though they hadn't been formally introduced. "Mr. Wilson," Harold managed, his previously authoritative demeanor replaced with transparent apprehension. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Darius repeated, the words hanging in the air like an indictment. His eyes moved from his son's disheveled appearance to the security officer's embarrassed expressions to the flight attendant's poorly concealed panic. "We'll discuss the nature of this misunderstanding momentarily." Throughout the cabin, passengers had their phones raised, recording the dramatic revelation. The incident, already disturbing, had transformed into something even more compelling with this unexpected plot twist. Thomas Anderson, in 3C, adjusted his camera angle to capture the CEO's commanding presence. "Jordan, Jayden." Darius addressed his sons with deliberate formality, aware of the many witnesses. "Are you injured?" "No, sir," they responded in unison, automatically straightening their postures despite the ordeal they'd just experienced. "Return to your assigned seats," Darius instructed them, then turned to the security officers. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Wallace." He noted their name badges with pointed attention. "Your services are no longer required on this aircraft. I'll be speaking with your supervisor shortly." The officers retreated without protest, their earlier bravado evaporating under the weight of potential consequences. Darius then addressed Lisa and Harold directly. "Both of you, along with any other crew members involved in this incident, will meet me in the jet bridge immediately. Senior Flight Attendant Parker as well," he added, having noticed Nancy hovering in the background. As Jordan and Jayden returned to their seats under the astonished gazes of first-class passengers, Darius turned to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. As CEO of Nationwide Airlines, I want to assure you that what you've witnessed today represents a failure of our company values and will be addressed immediately. We appreciate your patience as we resolve this matter." Several passengers broke into spontaneous applause, not necessarily in support of Darius or his sons, but in appreciation of the dramatic entertainment now unfolding on what they had expected to be a routine flight. Warren Phillips leaned across the aisle as the twins resettled in their seats. "Your father is the CEO. That's one hell of a plot twist, boys." Jayden managed a slight smile despite his lingering anger. "He just started. Hasn't had time to clean house yet. Looks like that timeline just accelerated," Warren observed as the crew members filed out to the jet bridge, their faces masks of professional neutrality belied by the tension in their shoulders. In the cabin, passengers whispered among themselves, some revising their earlier judgments, others stubbornly clinging to their prejudices despite the new information. A few expressed concerns about further delays affecting their connections. But in the jet bridge, out of passenger view, the real reckoning was about to begin, one that would ultimately transform not just a single flight crew's behavior, but an entire corporate culture that had enabled this moment to occur. The jet bridge became an impromptu tribunal as Darius Wilson faced the crew members responsible for his son's humiliation. Despite the cramped space and curious onlookers peering through the aircraft windows, he maintained the composed authority that had propelled him to Nationwide's executive suite. "Explain," Darius directed simply, his gaze moving between Lisa Bennett, Nancy Parker, and Captain Harold Green. The single word carried the weight of both parental concern and executive demand. Lisa spoke first, her rehearsed customer service voice strained with artificial calm. "Mr. Wilson, we were following standard protocol for disruptive passengers. Your sons were sitting in their assigned seats," Darius completed flatly. "I want to know which specific protocol justified physically removing passengers with valid first-class tickets." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. There were concerns about unaccompanied minors in first class. Nationwide Airlines Passenger Policy Section 3.2, Darius recited from memory, clearly states that passengers 15 years and older may travel unaccompanied in any cabin class. My sons are 16, as their identification clearly shows. Nancy Parker interjected. There were also passenger complaints about disruptive behavior. "Which passengers?" Darius pressed. "What specific behaviors?" The ensuing silence confirmed what he already suspected. There had been no legitimate complaints. "So," Darius continued, his voice dangerously quiet, "you fabricated policy violations and passenger complaints to justify removing 2 black teenagers from seats they had every right to occupy." Harold Green cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, I was only made aware of a security situation requiring passenger removal. I wasn't directly involved in the assessment." "Yet you authorized their removal without investigation," Darius noted. "As captain, you're ultimately responsible for everything that happens on your aircraft." Harold's face tightened, but he offered no further defense. As the confrontation continued, Jordan and Jayden sat in their first-class seats, physically present but emotionally detached from the luxury surrounding them. The excitement of their first solo flight and upcoming competition had been irrevocably tainted. "You okay?" Jordan asked his brother softly. "No," Jayden answered honestly. "But Dad's handling it." Around them, the cabin buzzed with whispered conversations and occasional glances. Some passengers expressed sympathy, others disapproval at the delay, while many simply absorbed the drama as unexpected in-flight entertainment. Thomas Anderson approached cautiously from his seat. "I recorded everything," he informed them quietly. "If you need the footage for any reason." Jordan nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir." Meanwhile, in the jet bridge, Lisa attempted another defense. "Mr. Wilson, I've been with Nationwide for 15 years. I always follow policy regarding passenger—" "Ms. Bennett," Darius interrupted. "This isn't your first incident involving questionable removal decisions, is it?" Lisa's expression confirmed his suspicion before she could formulate a denial. "Nancy," Darius turned to the senior flight attendant, "has Ms. Bennett expressed concerns about other passengers who didn't fit her personal profile of first-class travelers?" Nancy hesitated, loyalty to her colleague battling with self-preservation. "There have been similar situations," she finally admitted. "Primarily with passengers of color or those she deemed underdressed for premium cabins." Lisa's face flushed with betrayal. "That's completely—" "We'll review your personnel file thoroughly," Darius cut her off, "including prior complaints that may have been dismissed or buried." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Benjamin Taylor, Nationwide's Vice President of Operations, who had been summoned by frantic calls from dispatch after reports of the CEO's involvement in an onboard incident. "Darius," Benjamin acknowledged breathlessly, having clearly rushed to the scene. "I just heard. What's happening? Racial profiling, policy fabrication, and physical assault of minor passengers," Darius summarized clinically. "My sons, specifically." Benjamin's eyes widened. "Your sons were on this flight? I thought they were traveling tomorrow." "The science competition is tomorrow. Their flight was always scheduled for today," Darius replied. "And if I hadn't changed my plans to join them, they would currently be detained somewhere in this airport instead of competing tomorrow." The implications settled heavily on Benjamin's shoulders. As VP of Operations, all flight crews ultimately fell under his responsibility. "We need to make decisions about this flight," Benjamin noted, checking his watch. "We're already 20 minutes delayed." Darius nodded. "Captain Green and this cabin crew are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Call in a replacement crew." "That will cause a significant delay," Harold protested. "At least 2 hours, possibly a cancellation if we can't secure replacements." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before authorizing the removal of legitimate passengers based on their appearance," Darius responded without sympathy. As Benjamin stepped aside to arrange the crew substitution, Darius addressed the assembled staff one final time. "This incident represents a catastrophic failure of our company values. I'll be reviewing everyone's involvement personally, along with our HR director. Until then, you're all suspended with pay pending investigation." Back in the cabin, the delay announcement triggered predictable passenger reactions. Some demanded compensation, others expressed support for the decisive action, while many simply resigned themselves to the inconvenience with the weary acceptance of experienced travelers. A flight attendant from another crew entered to apologize for the delay, explaining that a replacement crew was being assembled. Nationwide Airlines is offering complimentary premium Wi-Fi for all passengers during the wait, and meal vouchers are being distributed for use in the terminal restaurants. What would you have done if you witnessed these teenagers being mistreated? Comment number 1 if you would have spoken up like Warren Phillips did, or number 2 if you would have quietly recorded evidence like Thomas Anderson. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories about moments when justice finally arrives. Do you think the airline crew should be fired? Or just retrained? Let's continue to see how this family's traumatic experience transforms into something powerful. While passengers deplaned to wait for the replacement crew, Darius Wilson escorted his sons to Nationwide Airlines' exclusive executive lounge. The glass-walled sanctuary, normally reserved for the airline's highest-tier frequent flyers and C-suite executives, offered temporary respite from the public scrutiny that had followed their ordeal. "I need to understand exactly what happened from the beginning," Darius said once they were seated in a private conference room adjacent to the main lounge. His tone had shifted from CEO to father, concern replacing the controlled anger he displayed on the aircraft. Jordan recounted their experience methodically, beginning with Raymond's suspicious questioning at security and proceeding through each escalating interaction. Jayden occasionally interjected with details his brother omitted, particularly the more overtly discriminatory comments that Jordan tended to downplay. "The flight attendant, Lisa, she checked our tickets 3 times, Jordan explained, each time acting like they must be fraudulent. And she kept saying things like, 'These seats are for our premium customers,'" Jayden added, mimicking Lisa's condescending tone. "As if we couldn't possibly qualify." Darius took notes on his tablet, his expression revealing nothing while his sons spoke. 20 years in corporate America had taught him to mask his emotions, particularly the rage building as he cataloged each indignity his children had endured. "When the security officers came," Jordan continued, "they never actually checked our tickets. They just took Lisa's word that we were disruptive." "I wasn't even talking," Jayden emphasized. "Jordan was trying to explain our tickets were valid, and they said we were being disruptive for that." Benjamin Taylor entered the conference room, accompanied by Vanessa Rodriguez, Nationwide's HR director, who had been summoned from headquarters. Both appeared appropriately grave, given the circumstances. "We've pulled the security footage," Benjamin reported, setting up his laptop, starting from check-in through boarding. The video footage provided unambiguous evidence supporting the twins' account. From multiple angles, cameras had captured Lisa's suspicious treatment, the fabricated passenger complaints, and the excessive force used during removal. Most damning was the audio recording from the aircraft's security system, which clearly documented Lisa's comment about "people like you" not belonging in first class. "This is," Vanessa began, then paused, struggling to find appropriate professional terminology for the blatant discrimination displayed. "Criminal," Darius supplied flatly. "The security officers used physical force against minors without justification. That's assault." "We've also pulled Ms. Bennett's personnel file," Vanessa continued, sliding a tablet toward Darius. "There have been 7 previous complaints about differential treatment of passengers based on race or perceived socioeconomic status. All were resolved without disciplinary action under previous management." Darius's jaw tightened as he reviewed the documentation. "And Captain Green?" 2 incidents where he supported crew decisions to remove passengers under questionable circumstances, Benjamin confirmed. Both involving people of color who had allegedly failed to comply with crew instructions. "Who handled these complaints?" Darius asked, already suspecting the answer. "They were processed through customer relations, not HR," Vanessa explained. "Classified as customer service issues rather than potential discrimination. The passengers were offered travel vouchers and the incidents were considered resolved." Darius nodded grimly. It was a familiar corporate tactic, reclassifying discrimination as poor customer service to avoid legal liability and regulatory scrutiny. While the executives continued their investigation, Jordan observed his brother with concern. Unlike his own tendency to process trauma internally, Jayden's emotions were increasingly visible. His leg bouncing nervously, fingers drumming against the armrest, eyes darting toward every new sound. "You okay?" Jordan asked quietly while the adults examined documentation. "No," Jayden admitted. "I keep thinking about how this would have gone if Dad hadn't shown up. We'd be sitting in some security office right now, probably missing our competition, maybe even being charged with something we didn't do." The reality of that alternative timeline hung heavily between them. Their father's position had protected them. But what about the countless other black teenagers who didn't have a CEO parent to intervene? "We should still compete tomorrow," Jordan said firmly. "We can't let them take that from us too." Before Jayden could respond, the conference room door burst open as Catherine Wilson arrived, her expression a complex mixture of maternal fury and relief. She had flown to the airport by helicopter after seeing viral videos of her son's mistreatment spreading across social media. "Mom!" the twins exclaimed in unison, suddenly looking much younger as they rushed into her embrace. Catherine held them tightly, her surgeon's hands checking for injuries with professional precision even as her eyes filled with tears. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "We're okay, Mom," Jordan assured her, though the slight tremor in his voice betrayed the emotional impact of their experience. "They didn't hurt us physically," Jayden clarified with characteristic honesty. Catherine turned to her husband, silent communication passing between them. The shared understanding of parents who had always known their children would face such moments, despite every preparation and precaution. "The videos are everywhere," she informed them, her voice steady despite her evident distress. "It's already trending nationally. #nationwide racism is the top hashtag right now." Darius nodded, unsurprised. In the digital age, corporate crises unfolded at lightning speed. "PR is preparing a statement, but I won't address the media until we've completed our internal investigation." Outside the executive lounge, a growing media presence had already gathered. Local news crews positioned themselves strategically around the terminal, while national outlets dispatched reporters to cover what was rapidly becoming the day's top story. Vanessa's phone chimed with an urgent message. "The board is calling an emergency meeting," she reported. "They're concerned about stock impact and potential boycotts." "Let them worry about stock prices," Darius responded. "My priority is addressing the systemic issues that allowed this to happen." Catherine sat beside her sons, one arm around each of them. "Do you still want to go to the competition? We would all understand if you'd rather go home." The twins exchanged glances, their silent communication requiring no words after 16 years of shared experiences. "We're going," they announced simultaneously. "Those judges haven't seen our solar desalination design," Jayden added with a hint of his usual confidence. "We didn't come this far to quit." "That's my boys," Catherine smiled, pride momentarily overtaking concern. Meanwhile, the investigation continued expanding as Vanessa uncovered additional incidents buried within Nationwide's labyrinthine complaint system. What had begun as an isolated case of discrimination was revealing itself as a pattern of normalized prejudice concealed by bureaucratic maneuvering and corporate indifference. The previous administration created a separate classification for what they called passenger compatibility issues, Vanessa explained, displaying a spreadsheet of reclassified complaints. When you filter for demographic information, 87% involved passengers of color, particularly in premium cabins. Darius absorbed this information with growing resolution. He had accepted the CEO position with plans for gradual cultural transformation. That timeline had just accelerated dramatically. "Prepare termination paperwork for everyone directly involved in today's incident," he instructed Vanessa, "and draft a company-wide communication addressing both this specific situation and our zero-tolerance policy moving forward." As the administrative response gathered momentum, Catherine drew her husband aside. "Darius, the boys are putting on brave faces, but they're shaken, especially Jayden." Darius glanced at his sons, seeing beyond their composed exteriors to the vulnerable teenagers beneath. As a father, he recognized their trauma. As a CEO, he recognized his responsibility to ensure no other children experienced similar treatment on his airline. The dual obligations created a complex intersection of personal and professional imperatives, a challenge Darius Wilson was uniquely positioned to address, though the path forward would test both his leadership and his family's resilience in ways none of them had anticipated. By late afternoon, the executive lounge had transformed into Nationwide Airlines Crisis Command Center. Public Relations Director Melissa Chen coordinated with legal counsel while drafting statements for increasingly insistent media outlets. The hashtag #nationwide racism had reached over 2 million impressions, with celebrity activists amplifying calls for boycotts and accountability. "We need to hold a press conference," Melissa advised, showing Darius the avalanche of media requests flooding her inbox. Silence will be interpreted as corporate stonewalling. Darius nodded, though his attention remained divided between corporate response and family concerns. Across the lounge, Catherine sat with their sons, reviewing their competition materials in a deliberate attempt to redirect their focus toward tomorrow's presentation rather than today's trauma. "Schedule it for 6 o'clock, Darius decided. "That gives us time to complete the preliminary investigation and make initial personnel decisions." While corporate machinery mobilized around them, Jordan and Jayden wrestled with their own decision, whether to proceed with the competition they'd spent months preparing for or return home to process their experience. "What do you think?" Jordan asked his brother quietly. "Be honest." Jayden stared at their presentation notes without really seeing them. "Part of me wants to go home, lock the door, and never fly again," he admitted. "But another part thinks that's exactly what people like Lisa want. For us to feel we don't belong in these spaces." Jordan nodded thoughtfully. "Dad always says existence is resistance, and excellence is defiance." Jayden completed their father's frequent mantra. Their decision crystallized simultaneously, another moment of twin synchronicity that had defined their relationship since birth. They would compete, not despite their experience, but because of it. Nearby, Benjamin Taylor was reviewing the personnel files of every crew member involved in the incident. "Lisa Bennett has worked primarily first-class cabins for the past decade," he reported. "Transferred from 3 different bases following what were classified as passenger misunderstandings, but look suspiciously similar to today's incident, and somehow kept her position despite multiple complaints," Darius observed. "Who protected her?" "Former VP of In-Flight Services, Richard Maxwell," Vanessa identified. "They were in flight school together 30 years ago." The pattern was familiar to anyone who'd navigated corporate America, informal networks protecting their own, regardless of misconduct. It was precisely this entrenched system Darius had been hired to dismantle, though he'd anticipated having months rather than hours to begin the process. A soft knock interrupted their discussion as Thomas Anderson, the passenger who had recorded the incident, requested a moment of Darius's time. "I've uploaded the full unedited video to a private server," Thomas explained after introductions. "As a civil rights attorney, I've seen how quickly evidence can disappear in these situations." "You're an attorney?" Darius hadn't anticipated this development. Thomas nodded. "Boston Legal Aid Society. I focus on discrimination cases, which is why I started recording immediately." The pattern was unmistakable to anyone familiar with systemic racism. This unexpected ally provided both valuable evidence and potential complications. Thomas's expertise made him a credible witness, but also meant he recognized the potential legal liability Nationwide faced. "Your sons handled themselves with remarkable dignity," Thomas observed. "They're a testament to your parenting." "Thank you," Darius replied sincerely, though they shouldn't have needed to exercise such restraint just to sit in seats they paid for. As Thomas departed with promises to remain available if needed, Lisa Bennett requested an opportunity to speak with Darius before the press conference. Against Melissa's public relations advice, Darius agreed to a brief meeting. Lisa entered the conference room with the stiff posture of someone preparing for battle rather than reconciliation. "Mr. Wilson, I want to clarify that I was simply following what I understood to be company procedure for irregular situations." "And what was irregular about 2 teenagers sitting in their assigned seats?" Darius questioned. "Unaccompanied minors in first class is unusual," Lisa insisted. "I was concerned about potential ticketing errors. So concerned that you checked their boarding passes 3 times, then called security rather than contacting the gate agent to verify their tickets?" Darius's tone remained measured despite his growing certainty that Lisa remained unrepentant. "I made a judgment call based on my 15 years of experience," Lisa maintained. "This is being blown out of proportion because of current social tensions." Her inability to acknowledge the racial component confirmed Darius's decision. "Ms. Bennett, your employment with Nationwide Airlines is terminated, effective immediately." You'll receive 2 weeks severance as outlined in your contract, contingent upon signing a standard separation agreement. Lisa's professional facade cracked. You can't fire me for doing my job. I'll sue for wrongful termination. You weren't doing your job, Darius corrected her. You were enforcing your personal biases at the expense of legitimate passengers. The documentation supports this conclusion, as does your history of similar incidents. As security escorted a protesting Lisa from the premises, Catherine approached her husband with news that shifted his focus from corporate to family concerns. I spoke with Lisa, she said quietly. Woman to woman, mother to, well, not mother, but you understand? How did that go? Darius asked, knowing his wife's measured approach often revealed insights his more direct confrontations might miss. She genuinely doesn't believe she did anything wrong, Catherine reported. She talked about maintaining standards and passenger expectations, all coded language for keeping certain people in their proper place. Did she apologize? For the misunderstanding, Catherine replied with subtle emphasis on the inadequate framing. Not for the humiliation, the assumptions, or the physical handling of our sons. This confirmed what Darius had already concluded. The issue wasn't just individual bias, but a culture that normalized and protected discriminatory behavior. Addressing it would require systemic changes rather than simply removing a few problematic employees. As the press conference approached, nationwide stock had dropped 8% in anticipation of public backlash. Competing airlines seized the opportunity to announce their own diversity initiatives, implicitly distancing themselves from nationwide scandal while facing similar issues within their own organizations. Darius faced the intersection of personal and professional imperatives. As a father, he wanted to protect his sons from further public exposure. As CEO, he needed to demonstrate transparent accountability. The press conference would require navigating both roles simultaneously. Dad, Jordan approached tentatively, Jaden beside him. We've been talking about what happens next. We want to be part of the solution, Jaden added with characteristic directness. Not just as your sons, but as the people who experience this firsthand. Their request surprised Darius, who had intended to shield them from additional public scrutiny. You want to speak at the press conference? Not exactly, Jordan clarified. But we'd like to help develop whatever training program comes out of this. Our perspective matters. Darius studied his sons with new appreciation. In the midst of processing their own trauma, they were already thinking about preventing others from experiencing similar treatment. You're right, he acknowledged. Your perspective is essential. As they prepared for the press conference that would launch Nationwide Airlines' public reckoning, the Wilson family found themselves at the center of a corporate transformation none of them had anticipated that morning. Their private family dynamics suddenly interconnected with national conversations about race, privilege, and accountability in American institutions. 6 months after the incident that transformed both Nationwide Airlines and the Wilson family, Jordan and Jaden stood backstage at the National Youth Science Competition Finals. Their innovative solar desalination project had advanced through preliminary rounds to earn them a place among the top 10 finalists, an achievement made more remarkable by the public scrutiny they'd navigated while completing their research. Nervous? Jordan asked his brother, adjusting his tie in the reflection of a darkened monitor screen. About the presentation? No, Jaden replied with the quiet confidence he'd developed over months of speaking to increasingly larger audiences. About the announcement afterward? Definitely. The twins had decided to use their finalist speech as the platform to reveal the Nationwide Inclusion Initiative, a foundation established with settlement funds from their discrimination case, matched by their father's personal contribution. The foundation would provide scholarships for minority students pursuing aviation and aerospace careers, creating pathways into an industry that remained stubbornly homogeneous. Meanwhile, across town, Darius Wilson addressed Nationwide Airlines' quarterly leadership summit, the latest in a series of organizational reforms implemented since that fateful flight 6 months earlier. When I became CEO, I anticipated having years to transform our corporate culture, Darius told the assembled executives and managers. Instead, It took watching my own children being humiliated to recognize the urgency of immediate change. The changes had been sweeping and consequential. Lisa Bennett and 7 other employees directly involved in the incident had been terminated. Captain Harold Green had opted for early retirement rather than face disciplinary proceedings. Most significantly, Nationwide had implemented mandatory bias recognition training for all customer-facing staff, with quarterly refreshers and anonymous reporting mechanisms for both employees and passengers to flag concerning interactions. Our diversity hiring has increased 42%, reported Vanessa Rodriguez, now promoted to Senior Vice President of People and Culture. More importantly, retention of employees from underrepresented groups has improved by 28% since implementing mentorship programs and affinity groups. These changes hadn't come without resistance. Several terminated employees had filed wrongful termination suits, though most were dismissed during preliminary hearings when evidence of policy violations became public. Nationwide stock had initially plummeted 15% before gradually recovering as the company's transformation gained positive media attention. Most surprisingly, Warren Phillips, the passenger who had defended the twins during the incident, had joined Nationwide's newly formed Customer Experience Advisory Board, bringing his marketing expertise to help rebuild the airline's damaged reputation. The incident was a catalyst, Darius acknowledged. But sustainable change requires continuous commitment rather than crisis response. Back at the science competition, the Wilson twins prepared to present their research findings to judges and audience members who recognized them not just as scientists, but as reluctant symbols in America's ongoing conversation about race. Next presenting from Westlake Preparatory Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, Jordan and Jaden Wilson, announced the competition moderator. The twins approached the podium with practiced confidence, their matching charcoal suits reminiscent of what they'd worn on that transformative flight. Yet their presence now carried an assurance beyond their 16 years. Our research explores scalable solar desalination technology for communities facing freshwater scarcity, Jordan began, launching into their technical presentation with the clarity that had impressed preliminary judges. What the audience didn't know was that the twins had modified their research focus following their experience, incorporating sociological dimensions to address how resource distribution systems often reinforced existing inequities. Their design now included implementation protocols to ensure traditionally marginalized communities received equitable access to the clean water their technology produced. Catherine Wilson watched from the audience, recording the presentation for Darius, who would join them later for the awards ceremony. Her eyes occasionally drifted to a woman seated several rows ahead. Nancy Parker, the senior flight attendant who had initially supported Lisa Bennett's discrimination but later provided crucial testimony during the investigation. Following the incident, Nancy had reached out to Catherine directly, expressing genuine remorse for her complicity through inaction. Unlike Lisa's defensive non-apology, Nancy had acknowledged her failure to intervene when recognizing discriminatory treatment. A painful self-recognition that led her to request a transfer to Nationwide's new crew training department, where she now helped develop scenarios addressing unconscious bias. As the twins concluded their presentation to enthusiastic applause, Thomas Anderson, the attorney whose video evidence had proven pivotal in the investigation, approached Catherine. "Your sons are remarkable," he observed. "Most adults couldn't have processed such an experience constructively." "They had support," Catherine acknowledged. "Many don't." This recognition had prompted her own professional evolution. Beyond her surgical practice, Catherine now volunteered with a mental health initiative providing counseling services to young people of color who had experienced discrimination-related trauma. The award ceremony began as Darius arrived, slipping into the seat Catherine had saved beside her. "Did I miss anything?" he whispered. "Just our sons demonstrating remarkable poise while explaining complex scientific concepts," she replied with a smile. "Nothing unusual." Darius chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. The past 6 months had tested his leadership in unprecedented ways as he navigated corporate transformation while supporting his sons through their processing of trauma and unexpected public visibility. And now, the announcement of this year's National Youth Science Competition Grand Prize winners. the head judge declared, for their innovative approach combining technological advancement with equitable implementation strategies. Jordan and Jaden Wilson! The audience erupted in applause as the twins approached the stage, accepting the Crystal Trophy and university scholarship certificates with genuine surprise, despite their project's clear excellence. We'd like to say something beyond thank you, Jordan began once the applause subsided. 6 months ago, we experienced something that happens to many people who look like us, Jaden continued. Their alternating speech, a presentation technique they'd perfected. But unlike most, we had advantages: supportive parents, financial resources, and ultimately, a platform. Today, we're announcing the Nationwide Inclusion Initiative, Jordan revealed, a foundation creating pathways for underrepresented students in aviation and aerospace. Their announcement triggered another round of applause, with many audience members rising to their feet in recognition of how these young scientists had transformed personal injustice into community opportunity. Later that evening, the Wilson family celebrated privately in their hotel suite, away from media requests and public attention. I'm proud of you, Darius told his sons, his usual reserve softened by paternal pride. Not just for winning, but for how you've handled everything these past months. We had good examples, Jordan replied, glancing meaningfully at both parents. Catherine touched the competition trophy thoughtfully. When I was pregnant with you two, I used to worry constantly about raising black sons in this country. All the dangers, all the unfair challenges. You still worry, Jaden noted with perceptive accuracy. Always, she admitted. But today reminded me to balance that worry with hope. You've already done something meaningful with your experience. Darius nodded in agreement. Nationwide Airlines is different today because of what happened. Not perfect, but better. More aware, more accountable. And all it took was traumatizing your children, Jaden observed with the dark humor he'd developed as a coping mechanism. Rather than dismissing the comment, Darius acknowledged its truth. That's the unfortunate reality. Change often requires painful catalysts. But the measure of progress isn't what triggered it, but what we build afterward. The conversation shifted to university plans and summer internships, the family gradually reclaiming the ordinary concerns of raising teenage boys beyond their extraordinary experience. Outside their hotel window, the New York skyline glittered with possibility, much like the uncertain but hopeful future stretching before them. A future where incidents like theirs might become increasingly rare as institutions confronted their biases and individuals recognized their responsibility to intervene when witnessing injustice. The Wilson family's journey from discrimination to advocacy represented just one story in America's ongoing struggle toward equity, a struggle requiring both systemic change and personal courage, institutional accountability and individual growth. Their experience had demonstrated how quickly injustice could occur, but also how transformation could follow when those with power chose to use it responsibly. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination in public? Would you speak up like Warren Phillips, document evidence like Thomas Anderson, or perhaps combine both approaches? Leave a comment below sharing how this story might change your response to injustice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to help others understand the impact of racial bias and the importance of standing against it. Thank you for watching this powerful story of accountability and transformation. Remember, change begins with awareness, but only succeeds through action. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination often hides behind policies and protocols that are selectively enforced. Despite their achievements and first-class tickets, the Wilson twins faced humiliation simply because they didn't match someone's image of who belongs in premium spaces. Their experience reveals how racism operates on multiple levels, from individual bias to institutional complicity. What stands out most is how differently the situation resolved because of their father's position of power. For every story like the Wilsons that ends with accountability, countless others never receive justice. The transformation of Nationwide Airlines demonstrates that meaningful change requires more than diversity statements. It demands structural reforms, accountability mechanisms, and leadership willing to confront uncomfortable truths. The twins' decision to create pathways for others shows remarkable wisdom. Rather than merely seeking compensation, they recognize their responsibility to use their platform to dismantle the barriers they temporarily faced but that permanently block others. Their story teaches us that true justice isn't just about addressing individual incidents, but transforming the systems that allow discrimination to thrive. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced? Would you have the courage to speak up like Warren or document evidence like Thomas? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to spread awareness about how racism continues to impact lives daily. Together, we can create spaces where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of appearance. Thank you for watching this important story. And remember, change happens when we refuse to accept injustice as normal.